Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video. In today's video, we are talking about probably the most controversial movie as of late, being Disney's live action version of Snow White. Um, we have a lot to talk about today, not just because of, what happened in the movie, but I think it is important to understand what happened outside of the film so that we can understand what is happening in the film because there's some things in there that if you are not aware of any of the stuff that happened while this movie was being made, you probably wouldn't notice. You probably just think that the movie is just different than the original version. But if you understand what happened before, there's a lot to unpack here. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to give you our non-spoiler uh, reactions to the film. Then we'll give the movie a rating, and then we'll talk about what happened in the film and give our thoughts on what happened with the spoiler section. So the thing that you probably want to know right away is, was it good? Right? That's probably why you clicked on this video, just because of all the stuff that's being talked about. And before diving into too many non-spoilers, I just want to put it right out there. I had zero expectations, and I thought the movie was better than I thought it was going to be. So take that with what you will. Like I said, we are going to be talking about a lot of things that happened with this movie. Just take that on into consideration. But right away, my thoughts were that it was better than I expected. Sarah, what was yours right away?
I also feel like it was better than what I was expecting because, truth be told, I was expecting it to be pretty bad. I know a lot of the reviews out there are pretty bad. A few of them are positive, of course, but the publicity before this movie even came out was pretty bad, and so it made me really nervous to see it. And I wouldn't say it was a fantastic movie, but it was better than I was expecting.
I would even go on further to say that this is probably the best Disney live action remake since Beauty and the Beast, which is a long time ago. It's almost a decade. So that kind of tells you where it's at, but Disney hasn't set the highest bar with a lot of these live action films. So take it take it the way that you want with that. Okay, so some non-spoiler things. I actually listened to about half of the soundtrack before I went and saw the movie. I wanted to kind of get a feel of what the music was going to be like, and so I cheated a little bit. And honestly, the opening song, I thought, which was the first one on the soundtrack, it gave me a lot of optimism because I think that the opening sequence was phenomenal. I thought it was great. One of the things that the original Snow White really didn't have the ability to do was to put a whole bunch of people on screen. Like, if you really think about the original film, there's probably 10 to 15 characters in that whole film, which is crazy to think about. They were probably on a smaller budget. That was their first movie. This is the one that launched, basically the Disney company. And so, thinking about that element, it was really cool to see what they could do nowadays with the live action rendition, with filling the kingdom with people, and, doing a huge musical number. So, I thought the opening sequence was great. Again, kind of going along with one of the better live action remakes since Beauty and the Beast. Same thing goes for the music. A lot of the live action remakes have been very, very disappointing with their soundtracks. A lot of them have just been the same old with just repeating the songs of the past, but doing them on a lower level. Some of them they really haven't been creative, and when they tried, they were really bad. And so I thought some of the original music for this one was a lot better than what we've been getting. Um, I thought the dwarf mine was a lot cooler than the past because I feel like they might have mixed the Disney ride with this. So if you know the mine from the original, it's kind of like just a hole in the wall. There's not like a big depth to it. Whereas in this film, and we see it in the trailer, they're riding mine carts like they're Donkey Kong and just racing through the mine to go to where they need to be. And I think it's kind of a cool way to connect the park ride, whether they meant to or not, to this film. I think that was kind of a cool addition. Uh, Before I get into the politics of this film and some of the interesting things, I do want Sarah to get a chance to give her thoughts on the movie. So, what'd you think?
Thought most of the music was pretty good. That opening song about like letting the good things grow or whatever it was that they said. Honestly, I forgot the words already, but I thought that one was a nice song.
I don't know the words, but I know the melody, and that's what stuck with me the most.
They did good with Whistle While You Work. Although that was uh a unique way to use it, I'll say. We'll get more into that in spoilers, but the song at least sounded good. The one that I really wasn't a big fan of was the Evil Queen's song that was
Mhm.
new. Something about all is fair when you're the queen or something like that. Just trying to prove that she's okay to be a big meanie because she's queen. And I don't know, they played it a couple times throughout the film and it just seemed really lacking or out of place. I don't think it was really just how it was sang. I think it was just the song itself I didn't really like. Um,
I feel like Disney has struggled with the villain songs as of late. Um, I think it's
yeah.
been a while since they've had a real killer one.
Yeah, I mean we even saw with The Lion King and the uh
The embarrassing bye-bye song.
that one too, but I was thinking of Be Prepared and how lackluster that was, and that wasn't even a remake, like or that wasn't a new song, I mean. That was a song that was super powerful and then just got super let down with the live action, or at least in my opinion it did.
Mhm.
Um I f I feel like they did a lot of unique twists with this film, both to elaborate on some of the lore, but then also to just completely change some of the stuff. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. And I'm trying to be very non-spoiler right now. We'll get a lot more nitty-gritty into it when we get into the spoilers. Um, Trying to think of what else I can say before we really get into there. The dress, the Snow White dress, that looked beautiful. It was a little bit different than the original. She doesn't have the cape and stuff, and her shoes are different, but the overall just like the costume design was really good, I thought. So that was nice. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of about all I can say without going into spoilers.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk a bit about, what happened with this movie and probably why a lot of people are very, very upset about it. Um, so when this movie was first being put together, Disney made the decision where they felt if they had the dwarves in the movie, that that would be offensive to the little people community. And so instead, what they decided to do was have these seven mythical creatures. And there's pictures out there online. You can Google it yourself and see right away what the first rendition was for this film. Instead of having the dwarves, they had these mythical creatures. And they just looked like normal human beings. And then once that was announced, Disney or the fans were super upset at Disney. It was a how dare you, like this is the movie that started it all. It is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, not Snow White and the Seven Mythical Creatures. We didn't really have a title at this point, but that's basically what it was. And so because there was so much backlash, Disney said we're going back to the dwarfs. Okay. And so then Rachel Zegler, she decided to throw some gasoline on the fire, and she decided to basically talk about how this movie doesn't have a prince. Snow White doesn't need a love interest. She is a powerful character on her own, and she can get things done without a man. which ruffled a lot of feathers, right? And I'm just gonna, it's not a spoiler as for what happened in the film, but I can tell you that there's time and time again where she does need help and she gets help from the male character that is replacing the prince. So it's a very, very bad way to basically spit in the faces of people saying, we're not doing what the original was. We're going to do our own thing. It's going to be phenomenal. And then the things that she said doesn't even line up with the film. So I think if there's anybody to blame, aside from Disney's first instance where, they really upset people, Rachel definitely put the nail in the coffin on it. So we were set up to understand all that stuff. Well, one of the things that I'm pretty sure we gather from the trailer, did we see our subplot in the trailer? Do you remember?
I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to, but she does talk a lot about wanting to free the townspeople in the trailer.
Okay, so there is
And the Waiting on a Wish song.
so instead of the prince, there's a different character that is in the male role, and this character has a group of friends that helps him. And when they got on screen, I counted how many friends he had, and there was seven of them. And I thought to myself, no way. Did they do what I think they did? And so when the movie ended, I took out my phone and I Googled seven mythical creatures. And it was the exact cast members. So what happened with this film, and this is honestly why I think a lot of audience members thinks this movie is one, a mess, and two, kind of insulting, is that what they did is the movie that we get is the one that they first intended to release. And then the dwarves are thrown in the background. If you look at the main plot points of this film, especially the ones that are different than the original, the dwarves have no significance to this film. Absolutely none. And when we get to the spoilers, we will pinpoint more of what those are. But that's incredibly insulting. This movie is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The dwarves have little to no significance in this film. It's all about Snow White getting back at the evil queen and also bringing in this different group of people that kind of takes away from the dwarves. You look like you're trying to say something. What's up?
They did change the name for this live action. It's not Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's just Snow White.
Okay. Well, maybe that was the title back then
Let me
too.
rephrase. I don't know if they changed it, like if they started the live action saying it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or what, but this movie is just Snow White.
Ah, interesting. But I also find interesting, the trailer because we didn't really have any previews or trailers when Disney first said we're using seven mythical creatures instead of dwarfs. We just had that picture of these random people in a field. Look it up. You'll see what I'm saying. But then when all the advertising comes out for this movie, it is all like hammering hard that the dwarves are definitely here. We have, the magical moments from the original film because we see like the dwarves going over the log as they're heading home after their day of work. We hear the Hi Ho song. We even hear Whistle While You Work with the different advertisements. And a lot of those advertisements are avoiding putting the mythical creatures slash new characters that are in this film not on screen. And I think they did that purposefully.
I just watched the trailer or had it playing in the background just to confirm if they were there or not and what was focused on and what was not. We do see Jonathan a handful of times when she hands him bread and when he's taken into the castle and stuff like that. So we see him, but we don't see these other mythical creatures or group of people at all in the trailer.
All right. So yes, they were definitely hiding what was going on. So I would say if you are upset about that, you are 100% valid. Even to me, I feel like it's somewhat insulting. But I can also see the point of the people that really like this movie because if those people aren't aware of what happened, it's a pretty decent film, quite honestly. So there's a lot going on with the film where if all this publicity, the bad publicity didn't happen, I would argue that this movie would have been doing way better. They've reeled in about $80 million worldwide. That is not very good. This movie is going to have some serious legs to just break even. So they got a long road ahead. Uh, I feel like there's something else that I was going to say about all that.
Well, while you think, the reason why I really wasn't looking forward to this film revolved a lot around two things. One was Rachel Zegler and her comments about not needing a prince. And we all know the classic story of Snow White and true love's first kiss and all of that stuff. If you don't need a prince, you're never going to wake up. Like, that's the heart of the story. And I know that they wanted to focus on other things and rebellion and that kind of thing, and that's all fine and dandy, but you can't just say you don't need a prince or you don't need a man. Like, that just doesn't make sense with this film. If you want a big, powerful princess, that's fine, but that's not this film. Um, and the other thing that I was going to say is just the dwarves. I can't stand how they look, honestly. The
It's
CGI, it looks so
bad,
silly. There's tons of animals that are CGI'd in this film. You know, you can see that in the trailer. All the critters, the birds, the squirrels, turtle, whatever. They look pretty decent. I mean, it's obvious they're not real, but they look somewhat believable, or at least normal looking for what they're supposed to be. There's some rabbits that looked a little funny to me. Like they had some weirdly shaped face and bodies. They didn't look super real, but I don't know. The dwarves, I understand that we are not of the little pe person community, so we can't necessarily speak for them, but I feel like it would have done them more justice to allow some of them to be a part of that. And it's kind of weird, I think. Um,
are you talking about the cast photo? That was really weird.
yeah, that was really strange. There was a photo that was released of her with the cast of the Seven Dwarves, and they're just, I don't know, all various, a very diverse group, but none of them that are of that community. Um, and I thought it was weird to say that they were the Seven Dwarfs because they were just voice actors.
Right.
What was I gonna say?
I say, while you're thinking of that, I'm going to piggyback off this conversation, especially, well, I remember the other thing, and I'll talk about that later. But to piggyback off of this, you may be wondering, why did they CGI the dwarfs into this film? And that goes back to when I was talking about this film, even though they're in it, they really aren't the big, like that they're not a big contributor to the overall plot that they really wanted to push. Of course, what happens in the original happens in this movie, but it's really not the foundation of the film. And it's because they didn't want, Snow White to rely on this prince, which, mind you, for those of you that aren't aware, in the original Snow White, if you read the book that was released by Disney, Snow White and the prince were actually boyfriend and girlfriend. They were just hiding their relationship from the evil queen. And so it's not like it was just some random dude was like stalking her and then because that's what a lot of people argue is that he was a weird stalker. He's this weird dude that just showed up at the end and kissed a dead body. Like who does that? And it's like that's not the case. They were actually, mutually involved with each other. So taking that plot point away, um, also took a lot of the other stuff with it, unfortunately. But why were the dwarves CGI and why wasn't the little people community allowed in here? It's because they filmed, in my opinion, I'm my tinfoil hat theory is that they filmed this movie, the majority of it, with the mythical creature people. And then when they thought, oh crap, people are going to be very upset that the dwarves aren't in here, they just pasted them in the other places. If you look at a lot of these shots that have the mythical creature people and the dwarves in them, if you take the dwarves out of those scenes, like literally just, you know, remove from background like you do with your phone and stuff, you still have the same scenes for the majority of it. So that's why I think they did it. They were like, we need to be cost effective, and they don't want to reshoot literally almost everything in the film because now they'd have to have, the live actors of the little people community involved with the live actors that were the mythical creatures, and that would cost even more. Even as it sits, this movie has an enormous budget. So that's why I think they did not bring in actual actors for this film is because they were trying to cut corners and like you said, ended up making it, you know, not look very good. I was telling Sarah that aside from Dopey, Grumpy, and Doc, the other four, I couldn't tell you who's who. Just because there wasn't anything that really set them apart. Now, of course, if they start talking or if you see Sneezy sneeze, then you can pick apart who they are. But if you put a picture of the seven dwarves up from the original, I could pick them all apart because they look different. Like Sleepy has the bag under his eyes, or Sneezy has like a very big nose. I even think his eyes are a little droopy, but um,
Like he's got allergy eyes.
yeah. And then Happy, he's got a big smiley face all the time. Like, there's a lot of things that they did with the original rendition that just really wasn't here. And I think it's because they really just wanted to get the dwarves in there to make people happy and then just let it be. Um, yeah.
One last thing before we dive into ratings and then eventually spoilers is um how do we feel that our two main actresses did? I think we should kind of touch on that. I feel like they both did a really good job. I am surprised to be hearing myself say that because I really didn't like Rachel Zegler in the Hunger Games movie that came out somewhat recently. I think that was last year. I just her character really didn't ring true to me, and her song performance I thought was not the greatest in that film. I feel like in this movie she did pretty great. Not to say that she was perfect by any means or that I'm now like her number one fan or anything, but I think that her singing ability was maybe she had more vocal coaching or something. I don't know. It sounded a lot better for most of the songs. And that her acting was just pretty good, I would say. Gal Gadot or the Evil Queen or Gal Gadot, I always forget which way it's supposed to be pronounced.
Pretty sure it's Gal Gadot.
Um her also, I feel like she did a really great job. I am a fan of her normally anyway. Again, the one thing that I thought was kind of iffy for her was her main song, but I don't know that that was all her. I feel like that was partially the writing of the song and partially her performance of the song and like how she quote unquote danced during it. Not that
I
she
think
was dancing, just, the movement of her body when she was singing. It seemed a little discombobulated or disjointed.
I think it was way more on the side of the writing of the music.
How do you
Oh,
feel about those two?
sorry, I didn't know you were done. I thought they did great. There was only one shot in particular that I thought Rachel Zegler did awful at, but aside from the one shot, uh, I thought she did a really good job. I think her pipes for singing was really good. The big musical number that she has on her own, I don't know the name of it, but it's something.
Waiting on a Wish?
Yeah, that was a really good one. And overall, she did really good. I would say also Gal Gadot. I think she was my favorite part of the film. She did a really good her own version of the Evil Queen. I would agree that the music number was a little off, but I think it was only a little off the first time that they did it. They do a reprise of the music later on in the film in different spots, and I think those other spots made a lot more sense. Um, yeah. The last thing that I forgot, the thing that I have forgotten and I wanted to bring it up before we do ratings is that sometimes people may be wondering why did this go to theaters and not Disney Plus, which I think would also be a good argument because they've had a good handful of live actions go to Disney Plus. They had Pinocchio, they had Pan and Wendy, they had Lady and the Tramp. So it could have been an option, but sad to say, I honestly think Disney is just hoping for this to be a major tax write-off, and that's why they sent it to theaters. So I don't know. I don't think they're gonna make as much money as they wanted to. I think what will happen is I think when this finally does come to Disney Plus, I think there's gonna be a jolt in subscribers because people would rather see it on streaming than pay the obnoxious amount of money to go to the movie theaters. So that's my prediction. I think they're gonna get a tax write-off with it and then send it to Disney Plus and get an influx in subscribers. What would you give this movie out of 10?
So before my rating, I'm going to do one last small little thing, and that's talking about her hair or her wig or whatever that was. I think it's a wig just because it looked so different in a lot of different shots, and maybe it was styling, I don't know. But I feel like she didn't always look like Lord Farquaad. There are definitely some scenes where her hair, wig, whatever it is, looked pretty awful and like Lord Farquaad from Shrek. I'm sure most of you have seen that comparison by now. If you haven't, look it up. It's kind of funny. But there are plenty of other scenes where her hair looks a lot more normal and not necessarily like that, or is off or ungirly or however you want to call it. So I don't know. The styling throughout the film, I think, fluctuated a lot with her hair, but I just wanted to point that out because it doesn't always look that bad, or at least to me it didn't. So that being said, I am going to give this movie a 5. I feel like it's a fairly average film. It exceeded my expectations. Honestly, I was expecting this movie to be like a 3 for me. I really thought it was going to be pretty bad. Um, it did exceed what I was expecting. I don't know that I would necessarily want to watch it again, maybe once just to catch some things that I missed, but not necessarily like over and over again for fun. It doesn't ring as magical to me as the original, but it definitely was not nearly as bad as I was expecting. There are a lot of other issues that are still there that prevent me from going any higher than that, but I feel like a 5 is pretty fair for this film for me.
All right. So Sarah thought it was average. Remember, 5 is average for here. I'm feeling a little generous on this one just because I'm happy that it kind of proved me wrong in some way, shape, or form. I would like kind of like you. I was expecting to be a 1 or a 2, just based on what we were hearing and seeing. I'm a little bit higher than you. I'm gonna go with a 6, and I just think it's slightly above average because it's been better than a lot of the other live actions that we've been getting. So I've like when we were watching this, it was like a half hour into the movie, and I was thinking to myself, okay, I really don't have anything to complain about yet. Like, when does it really hit the fan and the movie falls apart? And I feel like it never truly got to that moment, but it was still kind of messy and not quite what I wanted it to, what I was hoping it to be. To be clear, we are huge Disney fans. We want Disney projects to succeed. I wanted this movie to be absolutely stunning, but we have to be honest as well. So I'm at a 6, saying it was slightly above average. Sarah's at a 5, saying it was average. So now we are going to go ahead and transfer over to the spoiler section. So, one of the things that I thought, I already mentioned that I thought the opening of this film was really, really good. There's another piece to it that I thought was really good, but I had to wait till the spoiler section. They talk a lot about in the beginning, Snow White's background. And part of that is, learning that she had a loving mother and father. Both of them were very generous to the kingdom with giving out food and stuff and just making sure, people never went hungry. They really respected the people of the kingdom. And then her mother passed away, so the king now had to, you know, find another queen, and that's when, the evil queen, she comes to the kingdom. She seems amazing because she can do all this weird magic. And so the king is just mesmerized by her and the fact that, she looks like Gal Gadot. So they get married, they're king and queen, and then the queen like tricks him into, well, I think she tricked him. I don't entirely remember the exact wording, but
I think she tricked the whole town and spreading fear that there's another village that wants to attack them, so we need to go out to war.
right, and so she sends him off to go fight this battle, and then he doesn't return. And so that's what leads to the evil queen being the only one in power. That is in some of the books. Some of the different renditions of Snow White, but under the Disney umbrella. And so I thought it was really, really cool that they started that. And I was like, okay, when you see the original runtime of Snow White, and then you see that this movie is like 20, 25 minutes longer, whatever it is, to me, that says we're going to get some additional lore about these characters. Is that what actually happened in the movie? Kind of. Not 100% though. So we get that established with the beginning of the film, and then they have like the musical number, and it transitions to Snow White being, present day, like her Rachel Zegler age. And
While you're talking about age for just a quick sec, do you know that Snow White's supposed to be 14?
I did not.
Like, I get that Rachel Zegler is not supposed to be exactly 14 because she doesn't look like anything like that, but this lady, she is, I guess she's only 23. Maybe it's the makeup or something, but I feel like she looked like she was 30. And I know that sounds really harsh, but you're trying to portray a teenager. Like, she just didn't look that young to me. It seems so odd for the casting.
Yeah. I don't know. I think what they were really going for, and this is just the politics of it. One, she has pipes. They wanted somebody that could sing. And Disney is really in this political field where they want to expand their horizons on these characters. And I feel like they saw her as a perfect fit for that motive. Um, and she was definitely like when people came out and said, she's not Snow White, because we actually get the explanation of why she's called Snow White immediately in this film. Snow White, because everybody says Rachel Zegler's not, white as snow, right? That's not what this movie plays out. This movie says, the king and queen were in this massive snowstorm, and because the baby survived during this storm, they decided to call their baby Snow White. And that's how she got her name. Not because of the color of her skin, but just because she survived a snowstorm. So yeah, we switch over to the modern day, or present day, I should say. Things have kind of gone downhill because the evil queen is very much, keeping things to herself and not sharing nearly as much as when the king was around. And so Snow White is cleaning one day and she sees somebody stealing, like he's grabbing potatoes. And this is our, new main male character that is replacing the prince. It's kind of like a Robin Hood type character where he's trying to steal from the queen so he can give to the poor because that's what the kingdom used to do. They used to take care of their people, and so he's trying to take into his own hands to bring that back. Well, he gets caught, and the queen wants him to, rot in a dungeon, but Snow White says there should be mercy, and so the queen's like, sure, why not? We're just gonna tie him to a gate outside. And so that's what they do. She ties him to a gate that is right in front of the castle, and Snow White follows them,
Do you know
and
why that's mercy or why that is? Why they did that? She tried to explain that, Snow White was saying it should be a punishment that fits the crime, not just lock him in a dungeon forever. And she said, fine, he's a thief. Steal his clothes, steal his boots, and then go make him sit outside where basically he'll freeze to death. Like, you
right,
stole, now I'm gonna steal from you.
yeah, that was kind of an interesting power move by the queen. So this scene I find kind of interesting because Snow White follows the dude and the guards that tie him to the gate. And it's not like she sat around for 10, 15 minutes to wait for the guards to leave. It's just all of a sudden the guards are gone. And so she approaches the gate and unties him and, slips him a piece of bread and he runs away. And so the guards don't see it, which I thought was a little bit unbelievable. But the evil queen does. And so this is what makes her go to the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall. And this is what triggers Snow White to be the fairest of all because she has a kind heart. And so the queen, wants Snow White to be killed. So she summons the huntsman and tells the huntsman to take her off and kill her and bring back her heart in the box. And so we do get that scene where the huntsman takes her out. She's actually picking apples, and the huntsman's about to kill her. I thought this scene was kind of had some very awkward dialogue. I feel like they were trying to mimic the original movie, but also do their own thing. And between those two, it kind of clashed. But he lets her go, of course, just like the movie. And then he brings back the box to the queen. I thought this scene was completely unrealistic. So, mind you, this box, like the original box, has some dark colors to it. We rewatched the original before talking about this movie. That box had some very dark colors. Now, to me, if the huntsman had cut out Snow White's heart, there's a chance that the box might have gotten a little bit of blood on it, or, when he hands the box to the queen, she if you move slightly at all, I think a heart would probably stay put more or less. Whereas if you had an apple in that box, which is what was in the box, it would roll around a bit. And so,
I guess it depends on how much padding was in the box.
yeah, I suppose so. The queen thinks, Snow White is dead, and so she asks the mirror, just like in the original, and he says, Snow White survived, like she's out in the woods. And so the queen, goes and looks at the box, opens it up, and finds an apple. I don't believe this for a second that she didn't look in the box and see that it was an apple before even talking to the mirror. And you may be wondering, well, how did it play out in the original? Well, in the original, the queen knew there was a heart in there. She looked at it at some point because she knew she had the heart. That's why when she asks the mirror, hey, who's the fairest now? And he goes, you've been tricked. That's a pig's heart. That's how she found out in the original that things were wrong. And so I really don't like this alternative take to it because it doesn't make any sense in terms of how the evil queen is played out here. So I don't know what your thoughts were on that scene, but I thought it was dumb.
I feel like if they were too scared to have a heart in there, like, oh, kids can't see a bloody heart or whatever, one, they didn't have to show it. They could have just said that's what was in there. And like she could have opened it for the mirror to see, but we didn't see. And they could have still had that same scene without showing it. Or two, if they wanted to stick with the idea of an apple because a pig's heart's too scary or whatever, they didn't want the guy to be a butcher. Why didn't they just show him handing her the box and her opening it immediately and finding out she'd been bamboozled? Like, if you're gonna change something anyway, it doesn't have to be the mirror that tells you it's an apple. You could have just showed her opening it and seeing it's an apple and being mad at the huntsman.
Yeah. I was looking up something and I was like, I feel like I'm dumb for looking this up because it's like duh. But I looked up the rating of this film, which is PG, and I looked up the rating of Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, which is PG-13. And the reason why I looked that up is because in that movie, we do see Davy Jones's heart. And so I was thinking like, well, if this movie was PG-13 in any way, shape, or form, they definitely could have shown a form of a heart and had been just fine. But yeah, I think they did it just to, you know, not be as quote unquote scary or graphic um, as the original. So we have that. We can switch back to Snow White. So Snow White does find, the dwarf's house, goes in there, takes her nap. She does, the forest is creepy and all that good stuff.
I have two complaints before we get there.
Yeah.
Well, one has to do with Snow White and one has to do with the huntsman. So I'm gonna start with the huntsman just because then we can kind of close that chapter for a minute. Is that so she gets mad at the huntsman for obviously not killing Snow White. And I could have swore she said that his punishment was to be her vulture, and that that's who was supposed to be like the vulture to, maybe I was thinking a little too much into this because it's been pretty recent since I've watched Sleeping Beauty, where she has a raven, or I think it's a raven, that's like her
Hmm.
side pet, so maybe that's kind of that was messing with my head. But I could have swore she said that he was supposed to be a vulture, and we see later in the film the vulture showing her the way to go to find Snow White's little cottage with the seven dwarfs. But we see the huntsman still trapped in the basement in the dungeon. So it obviously is he isn't the vulture. So I could be me, but I think that that was a misstep. Is that I'm pretty sure she said that that was going to be his punishment, not just to be in the dungeon.
I didn't catch it, so I can't speak to it.
And then my little nitpick was Snow White slash complaint. So she runs through the woods, and the woods are like attacking her as she's trying to get away from the huntsman. That I thought was fine. It's scary. It's not as scary as the original, if you ask me, just because I feel like things could be a lot more animated in the animation versus the real life. The branch is trying to get you. Like it's creepy, but it's still really dark and just a lot of gray, so it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. But they show her falling into a big area of water, a pond, right? So she gets completely soaked. And then she makes friends with these animals and she feeds this deer this bread. She just fell in a pond. So like that bread would be soaking, sopping wet. There's no way you'd have just like a regular piece of bread in your pocket. But that's not what they show. They just show her handing like regular bread, like she just dug it, fresh from the bakery. I don't know. I thought that was really weird.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see your point with that. Um,
So we're talking about the dwarves now and the mines.
yeah, so
Um,
she goes to the house and she sleeps in there. So mind you, in the original, this is the point where Whistle While You Work would have been. It's not in this movie, so we'll get there in a little bit. Um, she lays down, and then we see the dwarves, in the mine. They sing hi ho.
were they magical in this one?
The
Because they
dwarf?
showed their hands glowing like
Yes.
this weird, like as if you had a flashlight up against your hand, like that kind of glowing. And
Hmm.
then they all touched the rock, and then the whole mine started to glow, like as if they somehow gave life to the mine. And I thought that was really weird.
I would not be surprised because remember, the original idea here was that they were going to be mythical creatures. So I wonder if they had already like put all this money into the mine like lighting up and stuff. And so they were like, well, we'll just have the dwarfs have, the mystical powers and their hands would shine red and touch a rock. So I kind of wonder if that's what happened there, because yeah, I think that was kind of weird. They didn't. there really wasn't anything else that was very magical about the dwarves throughout the rest of the movie. But except for this one instance, it's like, how do the dwarves find all the jewels in the mine? Well, their hands flash and they touch the rocks. Well, in the original, they could just see them, and I'm pretty sure anybody could just see them. So I thought it wasn't necessary, but it was visually pleasing, I suppose. Um,
I mean, I liked seeing the mine all shiny. It just seemed really weird that their hands glowed and that they were the ones illuminating the mine with their magical hands.
yeah,
With no mention as to how, like, I mean, I guess they do say later that they are like 275 years old. So maybe that could allude to the fact that they have some sort of other magical powers, but it just seems really weird.
I think they're even older than that per se, but um, that's even another thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we'll get there. So I thought this scene wasn't that bad. I thought it was interesting to see this different version of the mine, and I thought the rendition of the song was fine. I thought it was good.
I would agree.
They head back home, and that's where they see Snow White. It is a little bit different than the original here. In the original, they see that the lights are on in the house, and they're like, "Oh my God, someone's in there." Whereas this one, they go to the house, they all go inside, they change into their PJs, and then they see her in the bedroom. And so that's what kind of gets things going with, they're like, "Oh my God, there's someone here." Um, So they meet Snow White, and then they kind of come to this understanding of, she's really not that bad. And then I think it's like it's the next day in the morning. They're all trying to like eat food. The dwarves are trying to eat food, and for one, they like over explain why they have their names, which I thought was really dumb. Grumpy is like, you know, I'm called Grumpy because I'm grumpy, and he's like, Happy, you're happy because you're happy, and
We know
it was like really dumb, and so
that was
the
part of the mine song too. Like they put that in there for a couple of them.
oh, I did not notice that. Uh,
I think they maybe for Bashful. I don't remember, but I do recall them saying that at least for two of them during the mine song.
gotcha. So then they get into this little scuffle with the food fight, and there's a bowl of like oatmeal that lands on Dopey's head. And so then all of the dwarves are like laughing at him and berating him, like bullying him. And so he goes outside, and Snow White sees this and decides to go out there to talk to him a little bit. And we get this scene where she understands that Dopey doesn't really talk. And so she says, Well, when I was by myself and I was working in a castle, I would whistle while I worked. It's just, to keep things fun and going. And so she teaches Dopey how to whistle. And so this is kind of his way to communicate. And so they go back inside, and then that's how we get this whistle while you work rendition for this movie, where they're all cleaning up the house. Mind you, in the original, the dwarves did not help clean the house, but this one they do.
This was the beginning of something that really drove me nuts with this film. And in particular, I'm referring to Dopey. So, um, I feel like they really kind of ruined the dwarves' personalities with this. In the original, everybody's just kind of happy-go-lucky, except Grumpy, of course, right? Because he's grumpy. But in terms of the Dopey character, I feel like that movie focused a lot more on inclusion. He might have been not as smart as everybody else, but he was still friends with everybody. They still treated him with respect. He was just a part of the group. And in this rendition, I feel like one of the things that, what was it, Bob Iger, I think, said was that he wanted them to start focusing more on just telling good stories and less on messaging. And I feel like they must have decided to do that after this film because they focused a lot on the dwarves are bullying Dopey because he's stupid. And he makes dumb mistakes and haha, doesn't he look silly and whatever. And so it was all about Rachel or Snow White, trying to empower him. And my parents taught me to whistle because that's how your heart sings. So you should just whistle because that's how your heart sings so you can communicate. And, basically teaching him to stand up for himself and giving him all this confidence and just, trying to really build him up. He didn't need any of that in the original. He
Mhm.
was just a great, character. He was just part of the group. He was fun. He might have been a little, quirky, silly, whatever, because that's who Dopey is. But I feel like they tried to really make him almost seem bad in this one, or maybe not bad, but like the other dwarves are bad in bullying him. And I feel like that was the wrong move. I don't feel like it was necessary. I don't think it added anything. It just made it almost seem depressing. Like, why are they all being jerks?
Which is really weird because, again, the dwarfs were not supposed to be a part of this movie in the beginning. So when they decided to put the dwarfs in this movie, this is either one of two things happened. Either this was a completely new thing that they decided to put in the movie, or two, she was supposed to be talking to a mythical creature at this point. They cut that character out and then placed in, Dopey. So it's really interesting to think about what some of these choices were when they were actually putting the movie all together. So yeah, I thought it was really strange that, like, when we watched the original, Dopey, like, yeah, Dopey was kind of an oddball of the group, but he was still really happy. Everybody loved being around him and interacting with him. But here, he is definitely an outsider type character. And I don't know, I feel like that's really not my, especially since Dopey's like my favorite of the bunch. I think I wasn't too excited about all that. Um,
To add
so
insult to injury, the fun song that they play, I think it's later in the evening when they're all dancing around and they're all playing their instruments and stuff. That whole song gets scrapped. They don't play the instruments, they don't sing the song, we don't get to see D Dopey dance with Snow White. I guess we have a different variation with the dwarves and the mythological creatures or whatever. They're not mythological creatures, they're a band of bandits, right? And I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but
that was our next thing to talk about, so not too
I,
far away.
the dopey dance is gone. Like, come on now, that was cute.
Yeah. It was an it's such an iconic moment of the movie that it's part of the Disney ride for the mine ride. So,
Yeah.
what can you do? Uh, so
So who are these bandits? She's trying to find her father, right? She thinks that he's the one true king, so he's going to restore balance to the kingdom. She just has to go find him. He's just off at war somewhere, maybe he's lost or whatever. And if she thinks if she brings him back, that everything will go back to how it used to be. And this is when she hears the guards from the castle because they're off to try and find her, right? And Jonathan finds her first and tries to help save her, even winds up taking an arrow for her because otherwise she'd be dead. Um, and this is how she kind of, becomes friends with him slash his band of bandits that are, just trying to survive really out in the woods.
which are the previously known mythical creatures, whatever we call them. So that's when, like, when we first saw them all come on screen, I was like, some of these people look familiar because I had seen that picture before. And I counted them on screen, and I was like, darn, I see what's happening here. They have what's special taken away from them. I'm assuming there was something that was going on with them before they brought the dwarves into things. I
All
mean,
but
one of
one of them,
them's a
because one of them's still a marksman.
yeah, one of them's a sharpshooter with the crossbow, but that's about it. So we forgot to mention that when Snow White first meets the dwarves, and they're talking about how they haven't seen a human in 200 some years. but yet they know outside their doors is the guards of the kingdom that's marching through the forest. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't think they knew about the guards other than thinking as the dwarves. The kingdom is going to come looking for you because you're hiding from them. So that's why they're going to come. And I wonder if they said that they didn't hadn't seen a human in 275 years. I wonder if that's what the line was because of the other group supposed to be mythological creatures or magical creatures or whatever kind of creatures. Like if that because they said they really didn't like the bandits, but that doesn't make sense either because they also said any human's a bad human because they're just here to steal things. So I don't know. It all is weird and doesn't make much sense.
Which also, the other part that doesn't make sense to me is like, they tell Snow White that our job is to mine the mines. Okay, well, they show a lot. The evil queen like rummaging through jewels and like her enjoying all of her own stuff. Like it makes me wonder because the dwarves feel this way, has her people been stealing their gems? Like it doesn't quite make sense. But
I feel like that's something we could have expanded on with this film because we chose to expand on various things, Snow White's childhood and stuff like that. We never knew really in the original why the dwarves mine the mines. Like that's their job and they go to work, but what do they do with them all once they mine them? They just let them sit there? Like what's the point of it? And I feel like that's something we could have potentially explored is, maybe they ship them off and they don't necessarily know where they're going and really they're going to the Evil Queen, but they just know they get paid for it or something, like literally anything. But we don't elaborate on that, I guess.
I almost feel like this movie should have taken the Maleficent way of storytelling, like how that's really Sleeping Beauty, but it's told from Maleficent's point of view. I almost feel like we should have done that. Like when I knew that or when I saw in the very beginning of the film that they were going to be doing some more lore expanding things, one of the things that's been played with is that the magic mirror and I don't know if you know, do you know about this? So the magic mirror is actually the Evil Queen's dad, but cursed basically to be in this mirror for all of eternity. And the reason why is because when she was growing up, he really disregarded her. He wouldn't compliment her. He wouldn't tell her that she was pretty or beautiful or anything. He just really treated her poorly. And so he was basically cursed to be put in this mirror to compliment her for the rest of her life. And I thought it would have been a kind of a powerful thing to have in there, this little backstory. But the way that they played, or the way that did this movie, I don't really see a way that they could have put that in there nicely, unless it was told from like the point of view of the evil queen. But we all know that wasn't going to happen.
I
Um,
didn't remember exactly why he was in there, but I did remember the lore of it being her dad and that he did something bad to deserve that. And so jumping to the very end of the movie when she breaks the mirror and like falls into it, or her ashes fall into it or whatever, and the mirror remakes itself, I was expecting it to be her. Like now she's in the mirror. But
I
I don't think the mirror doesn't have a face anymore, so I don't think it's her.
Right. I feel like that's what happened in the book that I read, um, but I don't remember 100%. Um, so yeah, now we got these bandits, the seven bandits that are trying to help out
Plus,
Snow White.
plus Jonathan.
Yeah, plus Jonathan. They're trying to help Snow White. Snow White is trying to stay away from Evil Queen's guards. She's trying to stay alive. I think you mentioned that Jonathan took an arrow for her, which is like, this is like the only scene that I can see that the dwarves had an impact on the film. Jonathan gets shot in the shoulder, and Doc takes care of him. Other than that, the dwarves have zero significance the rest of the way, aside from having the moments that they had in the original film. So Let's see.
So she gives Jonathan her necklace that came from her dad because that way he has a reason to return to give it back to her. And he's supposed to go off and basically uh not persuade, but like trick the guards into following him instead so that Snow White can just kind of hang out and chill and hide. But it doesn't really work because he gets captured super easily. So he gets brought back to the evil queen, and she sees that he's wearing the necklace, so clearly he knows where Snow White is, right?
Hmm.
So he gets put in the dungeon, and she keeps the necklace, and then this is where she decides to make the poison apple and whatnot. And I think she's wanting to go out to try to find her dad because she's not real confident that Jonathan's gonna come back because she doesn't 100% trust him yet. But before that even happens, she opens the door and finds the old hag or the evil lady, right? But she doesn't know that yet because kind of backing up, I guess, to what the queen was doing was making the poison apple. And I thought that whole scene of her turning into the old hag or the old lady and making the apple, I thought that was all pretty cool. That looked pretty neat.
I
This was
thought the
one of the times when
CGI was kind of poor.
you didn't like it.
I want so I was thinking about this when we were watching it, and what makes it so powerful in the original is that it's so freaking creepy. And yes, they have some of the elements from the original, like with the lightning and the she transforms, but it doesn't hit as hard as the original. Um,
I feel
I
like they did variations in her makeup as she's going down the stairwell to make her look older and older.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I really liked about this scene was that I felt this was where her song made the most sense. So I liked it here as opposed to when it first debuted.
Yeah. So she brings the apple to the little cottage where Snow White is, and I liked it and didn't like it at the same time, and I couldn't really figure out why until after we rewatched the original. So I feel like saying that okay, so she says that Jonathan sent her, and how do I know that this is true? Well, I have the necklace that you gave to him, right? So that stuff makes sense. I feel like that storyline was fine. You're gonna go back to try to save him. Let me at least give you this apple. That seemed kind of weak, and I didn't really understand or didn't remember what it was supposed to be. And the original Snow White, although it's still a little unbelievable, I guess, because she's saying like this is supposed to like give you whatever you want or something. It's kind of a weird line. Um,
Well, she could make a wish with the apple in the original.
yeah. Which I don't know. She's young and kind of dumb, so I guess I could see her
She's
believing that.
14.
She's 14 after all. I, Honestly, I wonder if they chose somebody who's kind of older to make her not seem 14 because they wouldn't want a 14-year-old girl, kissing some man.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so maybe
fair.
that's why they took the approach of her being an adult or not looking like a child, of looking like an adult. Because there's plenty of times in film where people in their 20s play high schoolers and whatnot. And I'm not saying it always looks right, but in
Oh,
this
it doesn't.
particular instance, it.
I felt like that was the biggest lie when I was growing up, was watching like Disney Channel and seeing all these people look like they were so tall, and then I get to high school and I'm like, we're pipsqueaks.
Yeah. So she tries to bite of the apple, and of course, it doesn't go very well for her. Um, she gets poisoned. The animals tell the dwarves who are in the mines to come back and help her, and so they come back to help her or try to, and they see that something's wrong. She doesn't get a glass coffin. Instead, they just kind of let her lay on this rock out there. Um, Jonathan's in the dungeon, right? And he is actually with the huntsman. This is where we see that the huntsman never became a vulture or anything because he's just in the dungeon. And so they managed to work together to break free of there and come and figure out a way to save Snow White. I think he steals a horse, and then the rest of the like woodland critters guide his way to go back to Snow White. Um, and he kisses her, and she wakes up, and that's all fine and dandy. I thought it was kind of weird. He didn't ask, like, what happened? Or like, are you okay? Or like literally anything to check on her. It was kind of just like nothing ever happened. She's just awake and there she is, and let's move on with whatever we're doing. Just seemed kind of weird. Um,
It was a very awkward part of the movie because, when she, takes that bite and then the dwarves find her, and then, the cackly old woman, goes, I think she just kind of like stares at the camera or something like that, and it fades away. It felt like that was the unfinished movie. Like us knowing the original is like, okay, this next part's gonna happen, but no, at this point in the movie, the original, the queen would have been dead because she falls off cliff. In this movie, she's still alive. So it's kind of like it's a very stutter. Like I felt like something felt off about that happening, but there's this subplot that we have to finish, so that's why it ended up being that way.
I wish we would have seen her make another potion to bring her back to her normal self.
So that's what reminds me of. So in the book that I read before, and I think it's called Fairest of All or something like that. It's a big line of the Disney books and how all the villains are connected. But in that book, there were basically the evil queen, when she's running away from the dwarves, she realizes that the potion that she used to become old was irreversible. And so she realized, I will never be the most beautiful in the land because I'm now a nasty old hag. And when she realizes that, she even realizes, hey, I really messed up here. And the book kind of insinuates that she committed suicide, that just wanted everything to end. And so it's interesting here about, how she has that potion to go back to being normal. It's strange. Yeah, I wish
Either
we would have
that or
saw
maybe it
that.
was a timed thing and the potion only lasted for, say, 2 hours or whatever it was.
Yeah, maybe.
But she's still alive, and we've got our troop of bandits, and we've got our seven dwarfs, and we've got Jonathan, and we've got Snow White. Let's go kick some butt and take the castle back, right? Well, we got to make sure that the kingdom is back to its normal glory.
And it's not, you know.
Does,
Um,
does Jonathan even do anything in this? I don't think he does.
so that's
Doesn't
another
fit.
weird thing about because I was waiting for something to happen. So Snow White, the dwarves, and the thieves, they all go to approach the kingdom, and Jonathan is I guess goes it's because remember he was in the dungeon and then he escaped, right? So he knows that entrance into the castle. So he basically says to Snow White, we'll infiltrate the castle, we'll go do whatever. Like he doesn't really say what he's gonna do. He just says we're gonna go in there. And so they head into the castle. We have no idea what the dwarves are up to, which plays a big role here. Um, so Snow White goes to the kingdom, and the people of the kingdom recognize who she is, and so they're banding together with her. We kind of get a little bit of a reprise of that beginning song. I forget what you said it's called.
Waiting on a wish.
No, not that one. The
Oh, the where the good things grow or something like that?
Yes, that one.
I feel like I'm not getting the words right.
So she's approaching the castle, and the guards stop her, and the evil queen uses magic to create a dagger, and she tells a guard to kill her. And Snow White is like telling all these different guards, like, I remember you back when my dad, was the king. You were this person. You were a farmer. You did that. You were a baker, and you never let people go hungry, even if they couldn't pay. So she's like reminding all these people of how good they were before the evil queen got there, which makes the guards turn on her. And so the evil queen goes to stabs Snow White herself, and this is where the one reason that the like mythical creatures show how good they are is the marksman shoots the dagger out of her hand. And so the evil queen is really pissed. So she goes to march into the castle, and this is where we see the dwarves. The dwarves are standing strong in front of the door. Great. She goes inside anyways. She goes up to her quarters with the mirror, and the mirror tells her, Snow White is, the fairest of all. You may be beautiful on the outside, but you'll never be able to um, be better than her. And so, out of, being super pissed, again, like Super Saiyan 2 pissed, she takes her little um I wouldn't call it a wand. It was like a mini staff that she has.
Yeah.
And she turns around and smacks the mirror and shatters it. Snow White sees this, she's in the room. And because of all this, there's like the dark powers of the mirror cause the evil queen to, turn into like this black goo or mush, whatever you want to
Kind of like
call it.
Ash, because she blows away when she fully crumbles.
Yeah, she like gets sucked into the mirror like Jumanji, and then the mirror repairs itself. And then Snow White, is the last person there. And the thing that really bothers me about this, again, this is the pinnacle of like the main plot that they were really pushing this whole movie and way back when mythical creatures were supposed to be the thing. The dwarves did nothing in this scene. Absolutely nothing. They even let her go into the castle. So, um, it's another way of proving the point of Disney really did not want the dwarves in here for whatever reason. And then because they had to, because of the way the backlash played out, they just pasted them in random spots. Even in the very ending here, we find out that the narrator is actually Dopey, which is kind of an interesting twist. I will say that. But in the big dance number at the end, where there's I don't know. Are they supposed to be like rose petals or something that are flying through the air? I'm not too sure what they were. I thought they were supposed to be like ash from like Snow White or something. I don't know.
I didn't catch what you're talking about.
So like when they're dancing, there's like a whole bunch of petals or something flying all over the place.
Maybe it's from the cherry blossoms because she said the one guy was a cherry farmer. I don't know.
Maybe. Um, Even in this moment, the dwarves really don't have a significant piece. They're just pasted in the background of everything that's going on. But the part that really bothers me, and I don't, maybe it's just me that doesn't understand this whole like middle of the movie. They being the thieves and dwarves, are trying to inspire Snow White to understand that maybe her dad is still alive. Like there's this message. I'm pretty sure they were talking about that. Like there's this thing that he needs to maybe tell her, that there's like this secret. And so she's longing to find her dad. And then when the old hag gets to the house, she says, "Well, your dad is dead," like trying to kill her hope. I took that as she was lying and just trying to, make Snow White not feel as empowered as she is. I feel like they should have finished that storyline. Like, maybe he was in a dungeon somewhere. Maybe he lost his horse and he didn't know where he was. I don't know. But
Well, they mentioned how he had gone to the Southern Kingdom or something, but literally nobody ever goes to the Southern Kingdom. So he could be there and we just don't even know.
right. And so I think it would have been a good thing to just bring him back at the end of the movie. Like, if that's really what happened, finish it. Don't just leave it, for all of us to wonder. Or is the queen right and just saying, yo, he's dead? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows because there's not a body, there's no proof. Um, but yeah, that's basically how the movie ends. They kind of do a big reprise of the opening of the movie with that big music number again, which I think is perfectly fine. It's just it I don't know. it left me with more questions than answers, and the questions I had really were hitting more on why did you do what you did the way you did it? Uh, so that's kind of what brings it down quite a bit for me. Is there anything else that was really big that you think we missed?
I have another tinfoil hat theory.
Oh, another tinfoil hat theory. I'd love to hear yours.
My little tinfoil hat. I feel like the changes that they made to this film from the original is basically a remake of the movie Wish, which is from, what was that, last year? 2023? Uh, 2023, so 2 years ago. I would even go as far as to say Waiting on a Wish, which does mention her braving a snowstorm, and that's why she's Snow White, right? But I think aside from maybe that line, that song is very relatable to the movie Wish. It's this girl who's longing for something she can't have. The person in charge isn't exactly being fair. She has to be banished, or she gets like banished or whatever, runs away. She finds some hope. Tries to do better things. She wants to come back and fight for the kingdom. She winds up taking out the big baddie. Like, it's kind of the same story. I know there's a lot of differences, and obviously the seven dwarfs and the bandits, and there's all these little things, love interest, because Wish doesn't really have a love interest. But a
They,
lot of the plot is the same, at least in my eyes.
they do have a Seven Dwarfs reference, right? Because didn't she have like the seven friends or whatever?
Yeah, you might be right. I Wish to me was kind of like a greatest hits, like they borrowed from a ton of different movies, little things here, there, whatever. But I feel like this live action was kind of almost like a live action remake of that movie, just or inspired by that movie, maybe. I feel like the storylines are just super similar.
Yeah. I did forget, and it's because it's forgettable. There was a very lame song between Snow White and the Thief. Um, so there's the one where they're kind of at night at the house. That's different. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the one where they're like first meeting in the woods and then they have a musical number. It's definitely something that should have been cut. It kind of broke up the flow of the film, in my opinion. That should have been cut. And the scene that I was talking about that I thought Rachel Zegler's acting was awful was so when she's in the woods and she hears the guards coming by and Jonathan like ropes her in to hide behind a little tree stump. When she looks around that tree stump, her facial expressions are so comedic. Like it seemed like she was a completely different character as opposed to Snow White. So when you see that scene, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Because I don't remember this. I remember the scene. I don't remember her like facial expression. That didn't really stick with me. Do you think she was trying to embody the innocence of a child? Because there's definitely some scenes
Maybe.
sprinkled throughout here where her acting seems a little off, but I think it's just that she's trying to seem childish.
That could be if she's supposed to be like 14, maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
Just an idea.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else that we should bring up about the movie? Our review is very, very long. It's almost borderline as long as the movie.
I feel like we've talked about this long enough.
All right. Well, Sarah gave it a 5. I gave it a 6. So that's kind of where we're at with the movie. Um, One of the questions I was asking myself was, one, would I watch this again? And two, because I'm a Disney movie collector, would I have bought this movie? I don't buy many movies anymore, but would I have bought this movie? And I think my answer would have been yes. And maybe that's just a little bit of the bias in the sense of the most recent ones really haven't been that good. Um, so maybe it just seems like it's a bigger light at the end of the tunnel with some of these movies. But I thought it was pretty decent. So uh, I'm definitely in the more positive of the crowd. But if you enjoyed this type of video and if you made it all the way to the end with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Drops a like if you liked the video and drops a comment letting us know what your thoughts were on Snow White. We have a lot more movie reviews coming out here in the near future, and we are very excited to talk about you or talk about them with you, not talk about you. Um, so look forward to that. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.